Hello and welcome to this look at the second annual DeliveryX Returns report, which was recently published just at the end of June. The theme of today is to pull out a few key points from that report, really give a flavour of it, and I'm delighted to not be doing that by myself. I'm Katie Searles, editor of Internet Retailing and one of the research editors at RetailX that work on these reports, but I'm joined by JD Klausner, SVP Business Development and Strategic Alliances for Loop Returns. Hi, John.
Hello, Katie.
So just before we delve into this really complex and interesting subject that is retail returns, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Loop?
Absolutely, yeah. So, born and raised in Belgium. I've been living in the US for the last 6 years. And I've been at Loop for roughly a year after spending, I've been in the e-commerce and retail industry for roughly a decade now. And I was very excited to join Loop. Number one, incredible people. Number two, fascinating problem we're solving for brands and shoppers that is very real, which we'll be talking about now. And then number three, just very exciting stage in terms of where we're at as a business and kind of, just leveling up just our whole operation. And Loop, for those that don't know, is the leading returns and exchanges software on the Shopify platform. So we were founded roughly 5 or 6 years ago. And Shopify has invested in us. They're on our board, and we work with over 4,000 of Shopify's fastest growing brands. And the whole idea has been really to create a very deep integration with the Shopify platform and all the different logistics players that interact with Shopify to really empower brands to be able to streamline the returns experience for their shoppers and really deliver an incredible shopper experience, which we'll talk about in a minute. But so very excited to be here and share a little bit of what we're working on and some of the findings that we're seeing in the market.
Thank you very much. And you've segued lovely there into that customer experience. We'll start with that because all of our RetailX reports have this dedicated consumer section. Retailers need that information and need to know what shoppers think of things. And just to give you some context, UK e-commerce returns hit £4.2 billion worth last year. For e-com alone, returns rates are sitting between 20% and 30%. Obviously, fashion's a lot higher. Furniture, we found it sitting around 7%. For the shoppers themselves, though, they're looking for things to be easy and convenient. Over 50% of shoppers questioned in our Consumer X research said that an easy returns process is very important. JD, coming to you, how can retailers make sure that experience is as easy as possible for the customers? Is getting that post-purchase experience at this stage critical?
Yeah, so great question. And I'll start with the basics. I think it's important to kind of reiterate the severity of the reality of the problem. If you're a brand doing 100,000 orders or 1 million orders or 10 million orders and 20 to 30% of those orders get returned, that is a massive, massive operational cost on the business, potentially destroying operational margins. So it's not a nice to have problem that brands need to really solve for their shoppers, but it's really a must have, especially at scale. So starting with the basics, ensuring that the entire post-purchase experience is as seamless as possible for shoppers will have a huge impact on, the way they interact with your brand, the way they spend with your brand, whether they become repeat shoppers. And like you said, convenience is key for modern day shoppers. They know that if, the experience post-purchase is not going to be smooth and easy with your brand, they can easily find it somewhere else. So in terms of how retailers and brands can make their returns as simple as possible, and returns is a big part of the post-purchase experience, especially if 20 or 30% of your orders get returned, notably in fashion apparel. There's different ways brands can enable that, easy and smooth experience. So it starts with having an automated returns management software like Loop. manual returns are truly the death of customer experience and business efficiency, especially at scale. So when we say manual returns, it's when a shopper has to initiate an interaction with a customer support agent, which can be really time consuming. It can lead to really long waiting times. It can lead to less optionality. It just creates like a really poor experience. So manually, you really want to reduce the level of manual interactions between the shopper and the brand to be able to initiate a return or an exchange in the post-purchase kind of transaction. And on the brand side, manual returns or manually processing returns will just pile on operational and labor costs in just the way warehouse employees are processing returns, the shipping costs for return labels, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. So I'd say it really starts by brands trying to figure out ways to automate returns for shoppers and increase automation internally. And when we talk about shopper automation for the consumer, it's really making sure that you create a self-service experience for them. So, again, reducing the dependency on a human to initiate a return. And you really want to essentially save the sale by offering exchanges, store credits, bonus credit incentives during that returns journey. And we call this retained revenue. As a brand, you've spent and invested so much in acquisition to acquire that shopper. They've gone through the whole journey to identify the product, buy the product. They receive the product, they're not happy with it. And then at that point, you're potentially losing that customer. So our whole mantra is retaining that revenue by delivering a really smooth experience for your shoppers to initiate like a return in a self-service way through a shopper portal, but then also incentivizing that shopper with an exchange or a store credit to basically buy another product that maybe is a better fit or better for what they're looking for. So I'll wrap up by saying, first repeating that manual returns is just not sustainable for brands. It creates a really high friction shopper experience. So you want to really work towards creating a self-service experience for these shoppers. And then you also want to increase convenience for shoppers. And you can offer a variety of return options, such as in-store returns. If your business or brand has retail locations that are conveniently located next to where the shopper lives, home pickups. We call this first mile reverse logistics instead of last mile. So shoppers, depending on where they live, can have the option for a third-party service to pick up the product for them. Local drop-off centers, whether it's lockers. We partner very closely with solutions like Rebound or InPost that have vast networks of drop-off centers. And so making it really easy for shoppers to just drop off the product. And then options for resale centers for a more sustainable path, which we'll talk about in a minute. So it really sounds obvious, but focusing on that really smooth and seamless post-purchase experience, including easy returns, can just lead to customer satisfaction, loyalty, and boost repeat purchases.
And that's going to be critical at the minute when retailers are really sort of struggling to get that initial share of the consumer spend in the first place. And it's an interesting challenge for D2C retailers compared with sort of in-store locations that have that customer experience opportunity. There is a chance perhaps in store for the returns journey to actually become a good customer experience. As this chart shows, there's actually not a massive difference between the levels of e-commerce returns and those happening in stores. 65% of shoppers return something that they bought online in the last year. That's sitting at 61% for in-store purchase. How do retailers balance this sort of omni-channel approach to returns, JD? Does that create an opportunity for them, or is there further challenges and hurdles to dealing with this multi-channel retail sort of ecosystem that we're now seeing?
Yeah, good question, Katie. Omni-channel is definitely a challenge, and it's certainly a challenge if you don't have the right tools and systems and teams in place. And obviously, omnichannel becomes a bigger priority as you get bigger as a brand, as a business. If you start D2C, and then over time you want to diversify your sales channels, and so as you diversify your sales channels, you also want to create a consistent and good brand experience, which leads to a lot of complexity. So if you don't have the right systems and tools to really focus on the omnichannel experience, it can lead to just really simple errors, shopper confusion, and just like a negative experience. So a very basic example in this case would be shopper bought a product online, wants to return it in store, or vice versa. How does the brand's inventory or accounting reconciliation happen if it's different tools or processes powering those different sales channels? And so if you do embrace omnichannel and really kind of focus on the right tools and systems and processes, it can be a huge unlock. And it just needs to be like a focus. And for example, you can set very basic and very clear return policies, and really integrate the experience between online and offline. You can integrate systems to basically collect and leverage return reasons data across your sales channels and improve your products. So if certain product SKUs have higher return reasons, you want to be able to capture that data and feed it to your product teams or design teams to make sure that they know that they can act on this type of feedback. And so when we think about omnichannel, there can be significant benefits to offering in-store returns, especially if you have a network of retail locations. So number one, for the brand cost savings, if you can encourage your shopper to return your product in store, you're reducing a significant amount of cost that would be associated with the shipping costs of the return. You're driving foot traffic to your store, and there's really a chance to upsell your customers with additional products and boosting loyalty and stuff like that. So, we know that we operate in the enterprise environment for the brands we support. A big chunk of these brands have multiple locations for retail locations. And so we try to align as much as possible with their technology stack in the omnichannel world to help them really connect the dots. So for example, if a brand is using Shopify's point of sale system, Loop will integrate with that point of sale system and essentially enhance that functionality to enable in-store returns, in-store exchanges. And that, it's also helpful for the brand to restock different items in different locations. And so we're always thinking about the omnichannel challenge, but it's very meaty and not relevant for any business because some don't have offline locations, but as they grow, it's inevitable, unfortunately.
It's an interesting one, that shipping costs that you touched on, and also for the brands that don't have an in-store location that people can return to, the reverse logistics is becoming so key for those D2C brands and ones without a store network. And as a result, we're seeing this incredible growth in the reverse logistics market. One of the charts in the report highlights that it's expected to hit $954 billion by 2029. And just you can see the growth even from 2023 to 2024 in this chart. For retailers that sadly do have to rely on the reverse logistics market, they don't have a store network or maybe lockers or the option to pick stuff up from consumers' homes. How can they limit or control those operational costs, JD?
Yeah. So Katie, those are big numbers you just said, and that number is clearly based on this data set or slide is only going to keep increasing over time. So yeah, as you said earlier, a return often costs or can cost up to roughly 50% of the item's original price. Obviously, depending on how expensive your average order value is, but essentially, if roughly 50%, if you're selling like a relatively cheap, not like a super high-end product, and roughly 50% of that cost is comprised to return that product. And on top of that, only 30% of return products are able to be restocked and resold. It creates, again, like a massive problem. So, I'll just start by saying that speed is like critical in order to process returns. So the majority of our customers, I'd say roughly 80% of our customer base, is in fashion and apparel. The types of products as a shopper you'd want to return tends to be things you wear. Sizing is a big component of that. But in fashion, a pretty high proportion of brands are very dependent on seasonality, whether you're selling winter wear, summer wear, swimwear. So when seasonality matters, speed matters in terms of how you're processing returns, shipping, inspection. You really want to maximize that window to be able to resell that seasonal item. if it's taking 2 months for a bathing suit to get returned and it's already September, I know the weather in the UK come September, you will not be looking forward to wearing your bathing suit from that point onwards. You really want to maximize that window to be able to resell that item that's been returned. And so another really important point is the quality of the data that you're collecting from your returns. And you really want to make sure that these return reasons, that the data that's coming from the return product is being seamlessly integrated into your 3PL or your warehouse management software, because that'll also help optimize the resale process. And so if you want to reduce operational costs, you want to resell your products. In order to do that, you need to basically streamline not just the speed of the return, but then also the data you're having around that return to be able to increase efficiency in how this product is being either refurbished or restocked in a really efficient manner. So that's on the data side. Then there's also automation, which we spoke about at the beginning, generating returns in a manual way. Not only is it kills the kind of customer experience, but then also kills speed and efficiency for the business in terms of also being able to protect their margins. But you really want to automate post-purchase tasks like returns processing, refunds, exchanges, really minimizing the minimal work, minimizing errors, and just maximizing speed on being able to kind of process the return and then deliver the exchange, and also be able to restock and resell the product that was returned. And so we're constantly thinking about like these challenges for brands. This is what keeps us up at night, what gets us up in the morning. How do we maximize just efficiency for these businesses? And so we created a whole suite of workflows that offer automations for brands in terms of the data that they're collecting on returns data, but then also to minimize operational costs like shipping labels. So if you're a brand and you're generating returns, you're a brand based in the UK and you're generating returns from Germany, from Spain, from the US, from South America, the cost of shipping those return products back can really vary and be super high depending on the geo. So through our vast network of integrations and partnerships with shipping carriers, we help our customers, our brands, the brands that use Loop software, to be able to go rate shopping for the most competitive rates and the cheapest shipping options as well. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful in providing just very tactical ways brands can reduce operational costs when it comes to reverse logistics.
And it's the operational cost is obviously a huge part of it, but there's also this sustainability element. The reverse logistics involved in the returns process have very high emissions associated with it. There's also questions being asked of what happens to the items when they do come back. And as you mentioned, the seasonality, if they can't be resold, what's happening to those products when they return to a warehouse? We've seen some startling figures and images of discarded clothes piled up on beaches. In 2022 alone, the company sent over £9.5 billion, so 4.3 billion kilograms of returned products straight to landfill. As we can see from this chart, there is things that the consumers are doing on their end. They are returning things for recycling, just over half. 48% are reselling things on a number of marketplaces, and 44% are not even buying new in the first place. They're starting to rent products. That could be a whole different webinar in itself.
Yeah.
How are retailers responding, JD? What is the industry doing to clean up the returns process?
Yep. No, I like the way, Katie, you said clean up the returns process, because that word has a very deep meaning. And yeah, it's an unacceptable reality that these billions of dollars worth of clothing or products are just sitting in landfills. And sustainability is not a growing concern, it's a substantial concern. I think it's not isolated to just retail or just isolated to fashion brands. I mean, although those are massive contributors because of returns. But yeah, the facts are scary. 40% of returned products end up in landfills because they can't be resold. So it really pushes the sustainable question and sustainable options really at the forefront of what brands should be thinking about. We're thinking about this problem all the time. And on a really kind of generic, kind of broader level, I understand, it makes sense, especially if you're a growing brand. There are concerns around the costs associated with creating sustainability programs. But for us, across our entire data set and customer base of 4,000 plus brands that we work with that are all kind of well established and in the enterprise, our data shows that time and time again, consumers support brands that offer sustainable programs, sustainable returns, and they're willing to pay for that more eco-friendly return process. And brands who implement and really invest in sustainable practices over time just see more growth. It's a bit of like a bold and broad statement there, but it's very true. And us as a business, it's deeply ingrained in our values to constantly think about how to reduce the sustainability challenges or improve the sustainability challenges for these businesses. So in terms of specific ways we can help, it's all about providing brands with the flexibility based on what's important to them and their context, and how to again deliver a great customer experience for their shoppers. So there's very like a whole suite of different solutions and integrations and experiences we help brands enable. But like some of the more basic ones here are, it's like a keep item program. So it just allows the processing of refunds and exchanges without returns for unsellable items, and really encouraging shoppers to either donate or reuse. Offering consolidated return drop-off centers. So otherwise known in the industry as boxless, labelless. So instead of needing to return the product in a box, in a label, you could just take the product and essentially reduce any packaging waste by just returning the product as is. And then, this is what I'm particularly excited about as someone who leads our partnership ecosystem and teams, is integrating with amazing secondary marketplace solutions like Arrive and Recurate. And there's many of them that we partner with, but really give like your items a second life. And so these platforms are seeing a lot of success and growth in reducing just waste in general, and just providing while providing a great customer experience in parallel. And it shouldn't be like one at the expense of the other.
Excellent, thank you. There is a lovely profile in our sustainability report on Reskinned, which is a platform that does just that. And it is hopefully a tool that retailers can use. As with all of our reports, we use retail examples and retailer examples to kind of showcase what's happening in the industry. And we have an interview with Currys on their repair offering, which is an interesting one from a tech point of view. We also look at how H&M's are using their loyalty program to limit returns. But O'Polly, which is a UK-based e-tailer of fashion, they did something interesting earlier this year, actually, just in May. They announced that they would start using a percentage scale for the return fee. So if a customer returned 50% of their order, they'd be charged £2.99. If they wish to return between 90 and 100% of their order, that would then rise to £8.99. They also stipulated that they would start looking at unusual returns activity, and if a customer was deemed to have this, they would put a pause on any future orders until a review could be carried out. It's such an interesting approach to dealing with serial returners and potential fraudulent returns. JD, what else are you seeing businesses do to tackle the returns trends of bracketing and wardrobing?
Totally. So I'll start by saying O'Polly is a proud customer of Loop. It's been very impressive to just see them at really the forefront of some of the most innovative initiatives in D2C, like fashion, returns included. I think this was a great example you brought up, Katie. So I think let's start with the definitions of like the different types of fraudulent behaviors. Fraud is a very big and scary word, and so is abuse, to be honest. So there's serious fraud and abuse, and then there's like, I would like to call it unintentional fraudulent behavior as it relates to returns. So there's really two core types to really keep it simple. There's bracketing and wardrobing. Bracketing is really when a shopper buys multiple versions of the same item, like different sizes, different colors, customer tries them on at home and keeps the one they like best and then returns the rest. But the intention here is really to find the perfect fit. I think we've all been, to some extent, guilty of this. I know for sure my wife is like majorly guilty of this. She's not in the home right now, so she won't give me any trouble for this statement. But this use case is very real. It's super common, almost inevitable. But again, when we think about protecting operating margins, can be just a killer for businesses. And so that's bracketing. Then there's wardrobing, which is, I'd say, slightly up a notch in terms of spiciness of fraudulent behavior. Wardrobing is when a customer buys an item specifically to use it for a very short period and then returning it. So I have my friend's wedding in 2 weeks and I want to buy a nice tuxedo. I'm going to wear that tuxedo, but I know I'm going to return it the next day and then receive a full refund for it. So that's like intentional abuse of a return policy. And it's essentially renting a product for free. And again, this just creates like massive challenges for businesses. And we've even seen for larger, much larger brands that have, like the Nikes of the world, there's influencers that are out there on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram that are teaching their followers how to exploit return policies. And it's real. So customers have really caught on to some of the tactics that brands are using to create a great customer experience. And they're pushing the limits of what's allowed, not allowed, and even worse, breaking the rules sometimes to basically entirely steal from the business. And so there's many different use cases there where a pretty scary proportion amount of returns to return products are associated with these types of use cases. And so the financial impact of fraudulent returns on these businesses is massive. On the flip side, or on the positive side, we have seen that roughly almost 40% of shoppers claim that having a return fee would dissuade them or deter them from engaging in this type of behavior, where it's probably just not worth it. If it's a free return, the temptation is high. But if there's a fee associated to the return, you kind of think twice. And it's a great method for any brand to just try out. And I think this is what Opoly has, boldly tested out as well. And it's a really simple and effective method. And so we have built a fraud detection engine, and we're in the process of really building a super sophisticated engine that will remove the burden on brands to manually address this problem and be able to really equip these brands with the data that they need to be able to act on it, but then also practical ways to reduce these fraudulent activities. So for example, you can target specific user groups that maybe have had these types of behaviors in the past and make sure that they have different return policies. You can give free returns only to your VIP customers, like a very specific cohort of customers. And then within the billing standpoint, that's where it can get quite meaty, but really fascinating is we always encourage our brands to evaluate at what point the refund should happen, because you really want to minimize that window for fraud. Should the refund happen when the return label is generated? Should the refund happen once the product has been inspected in the warehouse? And so there's many different ways to slice it. But at the end of the day, we really want to empower these brands to do what's best for their business, because sometimes speed matters and they want to initiate the refund as quickly as possible so that shoppers will buy that next product as quickly as possible if like seasonality is a factor there. So our teams are very equipped to help these businesses based on their specific challenges, but then in the background creating working off a massive data set. We're processing 2 million returns a month globally, like 2.5 million returns a month. And so through this data, we're also working with massive data sets to create this fraud detection engine for brands. So yeah, I didn't want to get too much in the weeds there because you could spend 4 hours just dissecting each one, but yeah.
It's really interesting that you said 40% of consumers would be put off being or having some sort of fraudulent activity if there was a return fee, because our research looked into the willingness to pay for returning that product. 23% or 23.9% said yes, 37.4% said sometimes, depending on what they ordered. So there is these fees have been around since, well, May 2022, when Zara first set the precedent. Consumers have had a chance to understand them, to sort of get used to them. Has this all been down to, you know, that communication and doing what Polly did and getting that email out to their customers to explain why they're doing it? Judy, is that communication and being truthful with your customers about why you're charging a return fee being key to making sure they accept it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's always a balance of, you know, what is the kind of intended perception that you want to create versus what is the like truth. At the end of the day, transparency always wins, and shoppers see right through it. And just like with sustainability, I think shoppers are willing to pay more for a brand that really embraces its sustainability. I think that the same applies to shoppers that are willing to pay more for brands that are just open and transparent and just deliver like a very real human experience. And so the communication aspect is one thing. There's also a lot of, I'd say, tailwinds for brands, not shoppers, but tailwinds for brands where the adoption is increasingly more popular of brands charging for returns. Amazon as the 400-pound gorilla that is also doing this, and so it's not like the brand has to feel like they're kind of everyone's zigging and they're zagging and they're going, they're going to be creating disgruntled shoppers. It's becoming more universally accepted in this day and age, in this economy, for brands to basically offset some of the shipping or return costs to their shoppers. And we've kept a close eye on this on our end, where roughly 50% of our customer base or our brands charge fees now for their returns. And we've seen very clearly that charging fees for returns has no impact on repeat purchases. And so that I thought was a really compelling reality that we're experiencing with our customers now. But and so shoppers are willing to pay for it if it's for like a fast and convenient premium experience, so to speak. And I'd say the younger generations especially are willing to pay that premium fee or that fee if they're shopping with a brand that prioritizes sustainability, prioritizes a better experience. So you can create a premium return experience or premium post-purchase experience by offering things like, self-service returns portal, fast shipping and processing, sustainable practices, first mile, like logistics optionality, like in-store, home pickup, local drop-off networks. So you can really try and package up an experience that makes it worth it for these brands, for these shoppers, to essentially feel comfortable paying for these return costs. And I think the communication behind these initiatives is obviously the most critical aspect in terms of the why behind it and what it means for shoppers and stuff like that.
Judy, a massive thank you for your insight on this report. It is just an overview, a brief look. This webinar has given us a snapshot of what's in this report. You can read more on the cost of returns if e-commerce is going to be a solution. And we do have a section really sort of looking at the data and how AI and machine learning can help with understanding that and maybe even limiting returns as a result. Judy, for people who are looking for more information on Loop, where should they go?
On our website, loopreturns.com, I'll take the opportunity also to share that we are actively expanding our footprint in the UK and Europe. So investing tremendously in hiring employees and building deeper and better integrations to tailor the needs of the market and local shoppers. And so, our website is probably the best starting point for anyone looking to learn more. And I was very excited to be a part of this. And thank you, Katie, for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you very much. You can find the full report on internetretailing.net under our research and data arm. But for now, though, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.